For a long time, I measured capacity by how much I could carry. The more I could hold without breaking, the more capacity I believed I had. Stack it up. I'll figure it out. That's just what strong women do, right? Well, there's a difference between a life that's full and a life that's overloaded. A full life still has room to breathe in it, an overloaded one doesn't. It just hasn't collapsed yet. And from the inside, the two can feel deceptively similar. And learning to tell them apart has been one of the most freeing things I've ever done for myself. Capacity isn't about how much you can hold, it is about how much you can hold well. Look at capacity as it being your inner readiness to actually receive what God gives you, spiritually mature enough to steward the presence, the revelation, and the responsibility that comes with it. This type of capacity doesn't come from pushing harder. It comes from releasing what is not serving you and renewing your mind around a new way of believing and living. In the previous episode, I shared how living in constant survival mode had been holding me captive to this identity that I no longer felt connected to. I could feel the pull towards a new phase of becoming, but I couldn't quite step into it until I released what was holding me back. That release did not happen overnight, but once I could see survival as my default, I began to catch the patterns of survival the moment they showed up. And when I caught it, I started asking myself some real questions right there in the moment when I realized that I was resorting to old patterns that I said that I wanted to release. Questions like, what is actually driving me to show up in survival mode right now? And what is the emotion underneath it? Is it fear? Is there a real threat here? Does this really require my full attention? Do I need to feel like I have it all under control? Or am I trying to manage someone else's perception? I started asking myself things like, what would it actually look like for me to rest instead of striving today? And would everything fall apart if I chose to rest instead of pushing forward? Asking questions like that led me to dig a little deeper and take an honest assessment as to whether or not my mind was clear enough and my nerves were settled enough to make a rational decision about my next step, or if I was just reacting. And as I was beginning to dig into those questions, I started to really search scripture for what God actually says about who I am in the middle of it, not what the fear was telling me, not what survival had trained me to believe, but what was actually true. The answers to those questions gave me something that survival mode never could: clarity. To think clearly about what it could feel like to thrive without the constant strain of striving I'd been carrying most of my life was new. And that clarity gave me more room to reflect and to explore new truths about who God says I am, and to start aligning my mind and my actions with those truths instead of with survival. Change takes time. Renewing the mind is a process, just like releasing was, and it takes time to discover and settle into new beliefs long before they start showing up in the outer world. Since I began releasing my survival mindset, I've become genuinely curious about what it means to live from a place of capacity. And I want to invite you into discovering that with me as well. So here's what I want you to do. The next time you feel yourself slipping back into an old pattern, I want you to try asking yourself some of the same questions I've been asking myself. What's actually driving this right now? What's the feeling underneath it? And what would it look like to rest instead of striving just for a day? And then ask yourself, is your mind clear enough to actually choose the next step? Or are you just reacting? And while you're going through this process of releasing and renewing your mind, I want you to remember that this process is not linear. You can think you are releasing something and start living in a new truth, and then find yourself at a new level of releasing and renewing things you didn't even know existed. That's okay. That's growth. That's what inner transformation looks like. This isn't a race, and you're not behind. You are not being graded on speed. You are being invited to trade what you've always believed about yourself for what God has already spoken over your life so that you can begin to transform and embody the fullness of who He created you to be. And that kind of exchange happens in His timing, not yours. That's all I have for this week. Make sure that you are subscribed to the Becoming Together podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and iHeartRadio so that you catch new episodes the moment that they drop. Also, make sure that you are subscribed to the Becoming Together Substack, where you can find the written version of this reflection and many others there as well. Until next time, take care and be well. Bye.